Marquez, he's playing Merfolk, the Fishies, and he has 4 copies of True Name. There you go. Now, the thing about Merfolk that is kind of weird is like because True Name Nemesis is Merfolk, you think this is where you'd want to put True Name, but I actually think this is one of the poorer places to put True Name Nemesis.
Yeah, Ben Lundquist, noted Merfolk aficionado, likes True Name Nemesis in the sideboard, but game one just wants as many lords as possible. See Robert with a turn 1 Curse Catcher.
Patrick, I don't know if you've ever had to delete a tweet before, but a few minutes ago, as you see a curse catcher here and Brad going to start cantripping, I had made a tweet about the Cleveland football team destroying the Patriots. The Patriots somehow have the ball again and are driving with a minute left. So if I go missing, or just delete my Twitter account, I don't know why that would be moving forward.
All of my deleted tweets involve poor grammar or syntax or spelling mistakes.
If I have to put my foot in my mouth for this, I am going to be quite upset, especially after the Vegas blunder earlier this morning. As Curse Catcher coming into the red zone, Brad a little brainstorm on the end step, which is pretty telling because that means that I have a feeling he's going to be going for some theatrics next turn.
Or potentially he's missing a mana source and wants to be spending 3 mana on something next turn. And it does appear as though he is short on mana. Well, no, that's not true. He can actually cast Sneak Attack through his Petal and his third land, but that exposes him to things like Daze as well. So we still might want to sit and try to develop a better hand before going for it. And as you see Brad here debating what he wants to put back with this Brainstorm.
And you see the show and tell, he's got a Lotus Petal. I mean, whenever this deck casts an end-of-turn Brainstorm, that means that they're probably going for something here. And he doesn't even sack the fetch land yet, so he is I've got a feeling that Brad is moving in here. Maybe not, okay.
I think Brad wants to keep all the cards that he's seen so far. He just doesn't have enough resources to fight through any resistance that Robert could realistically have. You see Rob with a handful of lords he's not willing to cast.
Yeah, he's not making any move.
Is that a swan song in his hand?
Checking the main deck, he has one.
Yeah.
Just one, wow. And he's got one of my favorite cards actually in the Merfolk deck. He has 3 standstills in his deck, which I absolutely adore. I love that card in this deck.
Yeah, I do too.
I always have. I don't Benny, he kind of comes and goes on Swan Song.
On Swan
Lundquist? Or sorry, Standstill?
No, he's generally very pro. There's been a couple meta games where he hasn't liked it, but as a rule, he's pretty pro. It just leads to more busted draws. You know, you really only have Aether Vial in this deck that provides you with just an incredibly powerful draw across the board. Standstill is another piece of that. You can play it on most empty boards because of Mutavault in your own deck, and it's very easy for this deck to get a slight edge in the early game, where landing a Standstill represents an enormous edge.
Brainstorm on the end of turn.
You know, we're in his main.
Oh, my apologies.
Looking at Brad's got a pretty powerful hand here, a reasonable amount of mana, a couple of forcibles to fight over things. The thing is that Robert's not really putting him under very much pressure, so he may not want to rush it just yet because Robert's getting enough time to set up potentially a better hand that can fight through even more resistance.
I mean, Brad's not underneath any pressure right now, at all. I'm kind of interested to see what Sneak and Show looks like moving forward. Like not with the composition of the deck because it's not really going to change. But again, we saw what happened at the Invitational where Huey in the finals, Brad winning with it, Jerry top 8ing, Brian Braun to win, like all of the big name players playing Sneak and Show. Mm-hmm. And then everyone preparing for it at DC. What happens moving forward to a deck like this where, and to be fair, again, Jared Betcher got second place with the deck and then won the week after the Legacy Open with the deck. So, I mean, is this deck just still going to just be huge?
Yeah.
Even though it didn't have the the Grand Prix performance that everyone was expecting it to have, or does it kind of decline a little bit here because people are just so prepared for it now?
Well, I don't actually think the field is sufficiently prepared across the board. I think some of the matchups have gotten a lot harder, and certainly the prevalence of meddling mage showing up in these decks makes things worse for Sting and Show. But I don't think this deck's going anywhere. Quite honestly, it's very powerful and consistent, and pretty stable as far as a multicolor combo deck can be in this format. You see a Wasteland on the Ancient Tomb there, and Robert deciding to fire up that Mutavault and getting across for 3. And
Yeah, shields are down a little bit now.
again, we know that Robert, or we suspect Robert has Swan Song in his hand.
One thing about, and I actually, Misdirection's actually a pretty good draw there for Brad. One thing I actually like about this with Brad is, or excuse me, from Robert's side, is that the Swan Song in his hand and in his deck is something that there's like no way Brad's going to play around that.
Right.
You know, it just has a nice one of, which I can see that card actually be a pretty good one of. As here comes the Lord, probably. Yep.
A Master of the Pearl Trident.
And again, I don't think. I don't think Brad has much of a reason to counter that or fight over that. And to be fair, I don't think Robert would just let him counter it if he cared. City of Traders a really good draw here.
Robert has so many cards in his hand that it's hard to fight over that. And now with the Petal in his hand, he has 2 sources of red. He potentially has 2 red sources of mana this turn, which highly incentivizes him to go for a sneak attack.
So this is the big turn, as they say. Swan Song gonna target the sneak attack. Nelson. Does he want to Spell Pierce or does he want to Force a Will? Because if he Force a Wills, he can pay for days. And the Curse Catcher.
The risk here is that if the Spell Pierce gets Curse Catchered, then you have to presumably sack your Petal to pay, and then Brad can't do anything with his sneak attack this turn.
That is the big issue. And I think Curse Catcher is going to say, hey, yeah, do that. Pay 1 more for that Spell Pierce. And Brad says, all right, I'll use my Lotus Petal to do that. So now Swan Song gets countered. This is in. And now, Robert, you have to kill him.
Well, he might be able to get enough permanents into play to be able to survive an Evercold trigger.
That's true. That's true.
He's already got 4 in play. He's got more Lords in hand.
He's got 4 Lords. He's got 4 Lords, a Master. Now, if it's Crystal Brand, it's a different story. But yeah, I'm with you. He might be able to get enough permanents in play because he's got a Wasteland in his hand. He's got another Master. I think he might have a True Name Nemesis too.
Yeah,
this could get mighty interesting.
I think the problem is he might not have enough blue mana to make 2 plays this turn.
Yep.
You can see Robert looks like he's counting, see how many permanents he has access to.
It's funny because that's actually one of the things that when my limited experience with Merfolk, because I have played in a couple tournaments, that was one of the frustrating things is that you're a mono blue deck, but you have 8 colorless lands, and so there are situations like this that do arise. Let alone the draws where you just have like 1 island, and then you draw a bunch of Mutavaults and Wastelands. And I think that might actually be the problem that Robert runs into here. So he's going to play a Wasteland. So that's permanent number 6. This is permanent number 7.
So he does get to have something left over.
And now he's going to activate Mutavault, and he's going to be able to crash in for 6.
This is 7, I believe.
Is that 7?
The Master
Yep,
turns
okay,
on.
double pump. Gotcha.
So now that, in theory, the Master left over gives Robert a 2-turn clock.
Yep. What's Brad draw? Gataxian Probe.
And the rest of Brad's hand besides the Emrakul doesn't do very much. It's just a Force of Will misdirection that don't really mean anything anymore.
So he's going to see a True Nemesis and a Master of the Pearl Trident. Cards that Brad really doesn't care about for the most part. You know, those aren't counterspells, so those don't matter. Oh, boy.
All right, there's a Gristlebrand. So.
Yeah. So he starts with Emrakul, I would think. Yep. Trigger Annihilator. What a huge draw there from Nelson. Drawing the next creature. So Emrakul sacrifice 6 permanents. I like to believe that he sacrifices all the lands and just leaves the Master around.
Right.
This was his plan all along.
Yes. Now Brad can be pretty confident that, you know, he's not going to die next turn, and then the Gristlebrand will sweep things up.
Yep.
Robert already shortcutting through his turn, just attacking with his master, knocking Brad to 2.
Yeah, and says, I hope you don't have a thing, but Brad shows him a Gristlebrand, and that is going to do it. So Brad Nelson, with a pretty good smile on his face there, feels
Yeah.
like he may have stolen one.
Well, I mean that the games against Merfolk when you're playing combo decks are always harrowing because you're under the gun pretty fast in most games, and then you just slog through Dazes and Pierces and Force of Wills. Definitely not a matchup that the average combo player would want to play against. Robert Straw, there was a little slow out of the gate, wasn't really pressuring him very much. But if Robert, even for example, just has a Lord on turn 2 instead of nothing, I think that game is very different.
And he's got even more to slog through after sideboard does Nelson, because you take a look at Marquez's 15 here. He's got 3 copies of Flusterstorm, 2 GTAs, Grafdigger's Cage, 3 Swansong, 3 Submerge, 3 Relics. So, it's interesting because we talk about Trinity Nemesis a lot, and it doesn't seem like it's, it's obviously fine in this deck because it's a Merfolk and gets bigger, and it's Trinity Nemesis, so, it's going to be a good card, but we don't think it's the best Trinity Nemesis deck. But I actually think this is a fantastic Swansong deck.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What's really nice against this is Swansong is often at its best against blue decks, and since your lords give everything Island Walk, you don't care about the 2/2 token that gets made.
Not at all. And a lot of the times, as we saw in that game, you want to be able to activate Mutavault and get in for damage, play a guy and leave mana up for a Pierce or a Daze or anything. And, the thing with Pierce and Daze are, of course, that if they have more mana, they're perfectly fine. But Swansong is for all intents and purposes, a hard counter in this deck.
Yes.
That really has no drawback, and it's arguably the best counterspell against Sneak and Show. And he's going to have access to 4 of those after sideboard, so things get very difficult for Nelson after board.
Yeah, I think Swansong is kind of a card that's still a little underexplored in Legacy right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of decks that don't care about giving your opponent a 2/2 for a variety of reasons, and Swansong is so efficient otherwise.
And the other area too, before we look at Nelson's sideboard, is for our vintage players out there. Hopefully, some of you guys are watching. I've always kind of wondered what kind of effects Swansong has had in vintage so far. We look at the Eternal Championships, and I don't think there was a ton of it there. But how much play does it see there?
It's got to be busted in Oath of Druids, right?
Yeah,
that's got to be insane in Oath of Druids.
Yeah, I imagine that card has to be seeing play in vintage.
Because you give them a creature and then they lose the game.
Yeah.
You have Oath of Druids.
I'd like to believe it's great.
I had to assume that's a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know very much about vintage.
Nor do I.
I had to assume that Oath of Druids and Swansong is a thing.
Yeah.
Brad's sideboard is 6 Haymakers in this matchup, 3 copies of Pyroclasm, and only 5 rather. 3 copies of Pyroclasm and 2 copies of Red Elemental Blast. He has his own Swansongs, Echoing Truths, Through the Breaches, and Leylines of Sanctity that I don't think he's going to want to touch. These combo decks can't afford to sideboard out too many cards, as they still need to keep their combo pieces and cantrips and whatever counter spells they want to keep in. But Pyroclasm and Red Elemental Blast seem especially well suited for these games.
You see, both players are finishing shuffling up. Brad is good to go. The happy giant, arms crossed, ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Robert Marquez down a game, but I think that I really think that things get significantly better for him after board. I really do. This is a matchup where it's very easy to board out Trinity Nemesis. You've got significant pressure with your lords, and that's just what Merfolk does. You've got Curse Catcher to make things a little more difficult. He's got Forcible, he's got Daze, he's got Standstill, and he's got Swan Songs. And, he might want to sideboard into some other cards potentially, maybe Flusterstorm. I don't think Flusterstorm is great in this matchup, whatever. But, he has a very, streamlined deck after sideboard of what he's trying to do. And I think it's going to be hard for Brad to win these sideboarding games. But again, Sneak and Show is this deck that can just go, okay, well, you're dead on turn 1.
Well, also, all of the disruption, for that to be powerful, is predicated on Robert having a clock, and the Red Elemental Blast and Pyroclasms are very good at breaking that up. Left to his own devices, Brad's going to be able to power through cards like Flusterstorm and Swansong without any pressure. It just doesn't matter very much. So.
And this is the important part. Okay, well, Silver Girl adept is it's still pressure. There's a Lord, so yeah, he's off to a pretty good start, is Marquez. See Red Elemental Blast in Brad's hand right now. Take a draw step here.
Another Flusterstorm drawn for Robert, so got quite a lot of counter spells.
Flusterstorm is obviously great against a large portion of Brad's deck. As here's a Ponder. Not great against the sneak attack part, but then Brad has to kind of choose. He has to try to figure out what he has in his hand. What counter spell I have to play around, because that's one of the things I like about this deck too. But blue decks in general Legacy is it Pierce, is it Daze, is it Force, is it Swansong as another one in the equation now, and is it Flusterstorm? So that's 5 things you have to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot to play around for sure.
2 and 3. you can see right now Marquez's hand. He has some relevant cards hiding out over there. He's got plenty of counter magic, and that Lord makes it so that the clock is good enough so that he doesn't really have to. I mean, next turn, assuming he just plays the Master of the Pearl Trident, and then like an island up, pretty much good to go.
Yep, he's got a pretty reasonable clock. And, you need to get on the ground first, then start holding up your counterspell mana. If Robert made a stumble or a mistake in the first game, it was not getting enough pressure on the board before holding up Swan Song. First things first, get some action going. Brad's still mulling over this ponder.
This is why I don't play these kind of cards. I guess I did with Reanimator, but I took a long time resolving them. That's for sure. He's going to shuffle away. I feel bad for anyone who had to play against me in DC when I was resolving a Brainstorm. I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, Ponder's even more complicated to resolve because there's the mystery box.
Yeah. It could be anything.
Or you can take the boat.
Looks like Show and Tell was just drawn there for Brad. Got a Gristlebrand in hand. He's going to pass the turn back. So Marquez going to take a draw step. He draws a Wasteland. Not a bad draw, actually. Because that Misty Rainforest, if it wants a red source, is going to have to be Volcanic Island. And he wants it so that he can play Lord and have a blue mana available for Flusterstorm or Swan Song. That's so important for him. So having the third island in his hand is a really big deal. He also has a forest, too. So, and his hand is loaded.
And this is a pretty rare draw for Robert. Only 10 islands in his deck. Typically, Merfolk plays 12. He's got 2 of them for 2 copies of Cavern of Souls.
I think it's interesting too because like it's easy for us here in the booth and for you guys at home to be like, yeah, you just cast the Lord and then you get in for 2 and you hold up your counterspell. But when you're playing a Sneak and Show, the fact that you can just die, or the big threat comes into play, and once the big threat's in play against Merfolk, it doesn't get off the board. It's horrifying to have to play against this Pyroclasm to draw here for Nelson, which is a very, very good one right now.
Part of the problem though is that Brad only has access to red mana if he's willing. He only can get 1 red mana. It's only if he is willing to sack his Misty Rainforest, which exposes him to Wasteland, and he can't play the Pyroblast with Red Elemental Blast backup.
Yep.
So Robert is going to be able to probably easily fend this off with one of his Flusterstorms.
Yep. The good thing here for Brad, however, is that the Pyroclasm is going to get countered, but that means there's going to be 1 less counterspell that Robert has. So, if you're looking for positives, that's
Oh,
one
sure,
of them.
yeah. It's really rough because, Robert's deck has so much 1 mana permission that it's not too taxing for him to leave up mana over following turns.
So he's going to say Flusterstorm. Both copies are going to target Pyroclasm, and the storm count is 2. So Flusterstorm takes care of the Pyroclasm, and Nelson has to just pass the turn back.
Now, if Robert has Wasteland.
Yeah, which we know he has in the grip.
Yeah.
He slides that right forward, so he says, yeah, get that thing out of here. So he's going to attack for 5, puts Brad down to 11. Nelson going to cast a Brainstorm. And I like this play, too, by Marquez of just not playing anything, because he drew another Lord for the turn. But now he just has, like, the full wall up. This is almost impenetrable. I have an actual wall of counterspells, and I have you basically dead in 2 turns, because the next attack will put him down to 6, and then he plays a Lord pre-combat and attacks for lethal. So there's Taxing Probe.
Not going to like this.
Yeah. Go ahead and write these down. Force of Will, Flusterstorm, Swan Song, and a Master of the Pearl Trident. It's going to be tough. Yeah. Yeah. Packs it in immediately.
Good enough.
Yeah. Now, one thing there for Brad is that he gets a lot of information about the things he needs to worry about if he's going to try to play the guessing game of what counterspell do you have. The bad thing is that you got a lot to guess from now.
Yeah.
Because now you have to worry about Swan Song. You saw Swan Song, you saw Flusterstorm, you know they have Daze, you know they have Force of Will. So his draw in this 3rd game, I think Patrick is going to have to be one of those, pedal to the metal.
Well,
play a sneak attack or show and sell on turn 2 or something.
Or he needs to have an early Pyroclasm. He needs to be able to blunt Robert's pressure to be able to assemble a hand that he can go off through all this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, if Robert's able to do, play a couple creatures and then leave all of his mana up, Brad's going to be in a world of hurt.
And if, of course, Patrick, I know you are very interested to know how the Browns did. And they find a way like they always do. 26-14 with 2 minutes left.
Believe land, baby.
Ship the loss. ship the loss.
Believe
If
land.
we could fire everyone from the team, that'd be great. I actually think after this loss, we should just be contracted. They already took away our football team once. We're used to it. Just take it away again.
Yeah, there's no big deal. Josh Gordon goes somewhere, and Joe Thomas goes somewhere, Joe Hayden goes somewhere,
Yep.
and no one else matters.
That's fine.
So whatever.
You know, it's really bad when you talk a lot of trash when there's 2 minutes left in the game, up 12, and then lose,
Yeah.
which I just did. Oh, God. At least my breakfast was good.
You can't delete that tweet.
Oh, I can't. No, I have to own it.
You
I have to
gotta
own it.
own that.
I even made the worst decision. I don't know how many people are familiar with Zach Eflin, but I posted trash talk on his wall.
The most Floridian of all time.
And now my phone won't stop vibrating. So I'm actually going to have to just turn it off because I know he is lighting me up real good.
I'm sure Paul Reitzel's really enjoying himself right now.
Yep. Foot in mouth, as it were. Foot in mouth. I still think Game 3 here is, even though Brad is on the play, it's still really hard to win.
Oh yeah, he's definitely behind in the matchup for sure. Robert came prepared for this.
I would argue he's a favorite Game 1.
I think Brad's a favorite Game 1.
Yeah, and then Game 2 and Game 3, ugh.
Same deal. The feature match we had last round with Bensek and Tom Martell. I think just 60 cards versus 60 cards. The Storm deck's favored in that first game, but the post-board games are they get so much more difficult for these combo decks. See Brad drawing up 7 here. A red blast. A lot of mana. Appears Brad is.
I think he's keeping. Does he have a one-lander on Marquez's side? You see a
Marquez
Silver
does.
an island, force, standstill.
Marquez looks like he has a
Marquez has
really,
2.
really powerful one-lander.
I think he's got 2 in the grip.
He's got
Yeah,
2?
he's got 2. He just pulled
Okay.
2 forward. So he's okay. I think maybe the problem here in his hand is that he might have a Silver Gold Dep and no Merfolk.
Sure.
I think that's the thing that's in question. Also going to start off with a Sacred Foundry, a Scalding Tarn, and get an island. A little manipulation, taxing improve. So we can find out what he's trying to keep. Yep, and that's what we thought. So Silver Gold Adept, Swan Song, Daze, Standstill, Force of Will, double island. So no Merfolk for a Silver Gold Adept, but he does have a Swan Song, he has a Daze, he has a Standstill, and he has a Force of Will. So a really, really good hand.
And 2 draw steps to find a Merfolk to make this hand excellent.
Yes. Additionally, his Standstill can go online if he draws a Mutavault. So
Yes.
he can play that game. And I actually think a lot of the time it doesn't favor the Merfolk player to do that. Like if you have a Vial, then it works out perfect, of course. But I think with how his deck is, the composition of his deck after sideboard, he can afford to just go, if he draws Mutavault, to just slam Standstill and just do that forever because he has so many 1-mana counterspells.
Mm-hmm.
So Marquez just plays an island past the turn back. No Aether Vials in any of these games for him as he drew, I believe, a Daze for the turn. I believe. And again, I really feel like this is one of those games where Brad just has to have a super early show and tell or sneak attack.
Well, it's hard to execute now that he knows the contents of Robert's hand.
Yep.
Even against a very early sneak attack or show and tell, Robert has a fair amount of protection.
And you can see Nelson's hand right now. He has the ability. He's going to play an X. He has the ability to play a turn 2 show and tell, or sneak attack, excuse me. And he drew a Silver Gold, so he did draw the Merfolk. But he has the ability to play a turn 2 one because he has Lotus Spell and Ancient Tomb, but it's just going to get countered.
Yep. And Brad with no Force of Will of his own.
Yeah. It's interesting because when people were preparing for Grand Prix DC, they were trying to figure out the best ways to go about beating this deck. People went towards a lot of Caracases, Death and Taxes. If they put a show and tell into play, I put something in that kind of trumps them. All of those different types of strategies. And to me, from watching these games play out, a heavy counterspell strategy actually seems like it's pretty good because, again, these 1-mana counterspells are great. Here's a Curse Catcher, allowing Marquez to keep up Swan Song, Force of Land, Daze.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I like the Curse Catcher play here as if he had a third land in his hand where he could play Silver Gill Adept and leave open mana next turn, that would be fine. But I understand, we get this bias because we get to see the hands. And if you're in Roberts, you can still be concerned that you could just die on the spot. But remember going back to the first game, the trap that Robert got into was not putting enough pressure on the board before trying to hold up a wall of disruption. And sometimes you have to be willing to lose to the best possible hands that Brad can have here, to make yourself more likely to win against the more likely range of hands that he has.
All right, so Brad is going to search out a basic mountain. So he's wasteland proof thus far. Small clock here by Marquez. He can build towards a little bit more. Yeah, and so he's going to play this and this. And yeah, I mean, I see exactly what Brad's doing here. He's going to take two. Is he's just basically saying, look, I gotta jam this stuff into your counter spells to be able to get through it. There's no other way for me not to get through it because he doesn't have a card like Silence or Orm's Chant or anything like that to say, hey, you have to counter this. He just has to jam his threats, which are Sneak Attack and Show and Tell. And Swan Song's going to take care of this one until he can't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So for Brad, he's going to get a little Swanee, a bird. I was actually wondering if he would have the bird token. Let's see a lot of Swan Songs.
Aether Vial the draw for Robert.
He thinks it's safe now to cast the Silver Gill Depth. He's going to reveal Silver Gill Depth, and what he can do here is, if he draws an island, it's not so bad. But he can't attack, which is a little bit awkward. And now, also, I guess since the Swan's in play, he can still play Standstill now and be okay.
Yes.
Right? Because he just attacks the Silver Gill Depth a bunch until the Swan trades and the Curse Catcher.
And Brad's already low because of the Cataxian Probes and the fetch lands and Ancient Tombs and such.
Brad's going to play this. He's going to play that. This is, oh wow. Okay, so he just has another Sneak Attack in his hand. His hand right now is Sneak Attack, Pyroclasm, and Emrakul.
Yeah, so he's just trying to slog through all the counter spells that Robert has right now.
Got to counter it. I think he's deciding what blue card he wants to remove. I think Daze is the most appealing one to remove now. Especially because he has two.
Well, maybe there's an argument that the second Daze actually improves the first one to some extent because you might be able to fight over something relevant.
Okay. Well, he removes Silver Gill Adept, does Marquez, so Force of Will takes care of the second Sneak Attack. Marquez gonna untap. Draw Island. And I think we serve with I don't like playing the Vial here.
I like playing, I think, just Standstill.
Me too. I think Standstill is more than enough right now. And I certainly don't like tapping out to play Standstill.
Right, because if Brad breaks it with a thing to go off with, that one mana allows him to draw Swan Song or Fluster Storm or...
Draw, Misty. And the other thing, too, is it is my belief now that Brad is already committed to the plan of just continuously casting Show Attack or Sneak Attack effects. So him playing the Standstill doesn't matter. The fact that he can't play a one-mana counterspell is what actually matters.
Yeah.
And you see he draws Daze. He drew a Swan Song.
Yep.
See, the Vial doesn't really have an impact on the game. And so really, it's just the way that I think Marquez needed to look at it when he drew it is just, okay, this is just a dead card.
Right.
It doesn't actually do anything. And the fact that I can draw into so many one-mana spells is what's important to me. And also, now Brad can pay for both Dazes and Emrakul.
So now he has 6 permanents in play, Robert, so this Emrakul's 6. Ironically enough, Robert will be done in by the Swan token.
Yeah, the Swan token that normally doesn't have much of an impact in this matchup. And you see he's saying, okay, that resolves because he can't double Daze. And Brad says, activate this, put an Emrakul into play, attack you, trigger Annihilator, make you sacrifice your entire board. You take 17. You go down to 2. And Brad will shuffle everything in. And as you mentioned, the Swan will be what gets it done.
We got a little birdie left over.
Yeah.
And there it is, yep.
That is it. So Brad Nelson is going to defeat Robert Marquez 2-1. Sneak and Show defeats Merfolk. And Nelson moves on to 3-1. His top 8 dreams are still alive.
Yep. Really hard-fought win there for Brad. Definitely identified, the way they need to play the game. It's often frustrating to try to just be brute forcing your sneak attacks and show and tells through those counter spells. But the way that Brad's hand was set up, he didn't have a lot. He didn't have brainstorms and ponders to try to set up a better hand. He just had what he had, and ran. Robert out of defenses there.
Yep.